On Monday, our lesson was on a bride for Isaac. Abraham's servant Eliezer was asked to go and find a bride for Isaac. Isaac is about 40 at this time. Remember, Sarah had died. Abraham's a lot older, and so he knew it was time for Isaac to get a wife because he wanted to pass the blessing down to Isaac. And so he tells Eliezer to go back to his hometown and find his family and find Isaac a wife there. So Eliezer goes and he arrives at the well, and when he gets to the well, he makes sure that he prays, and so he asks the Lord. He says, God, guide me on who to pick for Isaac. And so he says, Lord, give me a sign. Whichever woman comes and gives me and my camels a drink, then she would be the bride for Isaac. And the first woman that comes up, she offers water to Eliezer and she offers water to his camels. So he knew that this was the woman that God had sent for Isaac. And so he asked her name. Her name was Rebecca. Her father was named Nahor, which was the brother of Abraham. So he found someone from Abraham's family. So he goes and he meets with her family. He explains to them why he's there. They ask Rebecca if she is willing to marry Isaac. She says yes. And so Eliezer praises God because God answered his prayer and God allowed him to do what was asked of him. And so they arrive back into the land of promise, and she marries Isaac. Isaac and Rebecca wanted to have children. They actually waited 20 years before the Lord blessed them with children. And so God, whenever Rebecca was expecting, God not only gave her one baby, but he blessed them with twin boys. And so God had given Rebecca a promise when she had the babies. He told her that the older son would serve the younger son, which was different from what we normally know. Usually the older is, the younger serve the older, but in this case, God would do something different. The older son would serve the younger son. So they had their two sons, their twin boys, and they named them Jacob and Esau. Esau was the older twin. He was more red and he was hairy. And then Jacob was the younger one, and he was, normal looking, darker skinned and everything. He was, normal looking. And so the twin boys, that when they grew up, they also were totally different. Esau was more of an outdoors person. He liked to hunt. And Jacob was more of a home person. He would cook inside the house and clean and things like that. And so, of course, their parents taught them about the Lord and taught them about worshiping God and about the promise that was given to Abraham. And now their father, Isaac, was carrying that promise. And so one day, the boys were, Esau had came back from hunting, and Jacob was in the house. And so Esau, he was so hungry that he was like, Jacob, could you please cook me something? Cook that red bean soup that I like so much. And so Jacob came up with a plan. He was like, well, I could cook for him, but I want him to give me his birthright. Now, the birthright is the blessing, right? It's the material blessing, all the animals that their father had, all the servants, all the land, all of that. And then the spiritual blessings that come from heaven, all the blessings that God would give. And so Esau was the oldest son, yes. So rightfully so, Esau would get the blessings because that's who the blessing goes to, the older son. But remember, God would do something different. God would give the blessing to the younger son, which would be Jacob in this case, and not Esau. But the thing is, God would do it on his time, and God would do it his way, not Jacob's way. So Jacob was coming up with this plan to trick his brother when the blessing was already going to be for Jacob anyway. But he just thought that he would do that. So he says, Esau, I'll cook the food for you, Esau, if you give me your blessing. And so you would think Esau would say, oh, no, not my blessing. That's a good thing to have a blessing. Esau says, okay, you can have it for food. And so Jacob cooks Esau the food and he gives it to Esau. And so Esau basically gave away his blessing. And I told you on yesterday that kind of can show us why God was willing to give it to Jacob instead of Esau, because look how easy Esau was willing to give it up for food, and Jacob, he understood how important the blessing was because look how he tricked his way to try and get it. And so, yeah, they both had different views on the blessing, and Jacob knew how important and how serious the blessing was, while Esau, he was willing to give it up easy for food. And so it wasn't right for Jacob to do that. He tricked his brother. And I told you this was just the beginning. And so let's go ahead and get into our lesson today. After years had passed, Isaac had become much older, and he was blind, he was weak, and he was really old. And so he knew that, and he thought that he would die soon. So he knew that it was time for him to pass the blessing down to one of his sons. And so God had already spoken and said that Jacob would receive the blessing. But since Esau was Isaac's favorite, Isaac decided to give the blessing to Esau. So he called Esau and he said, go and hunt, get some venison, come back and cook it, and I'll bless you. And so Esau goes out to do that. And Rebekah, she overheard Isaac telling Esau this. And remember, Jacob was her favorite. And she knew that God wanted to give Jacob the blessing and not Esau. So she comes up with a plan and she tells Jacob, I want you to trick your father into giving you the blessing. I'll go get goats. I will cook for him. You will put the goat hair on you so that if your father touches you, he'll feel that you're hairy like Esau. She said, put on Esau's clothing so that you will smell like Esau. Remember, Isaac is almost blind at this point, so he really couldn't see well. So that's why they were able to easily trick him like they did. And so Jacob does everything that his mother tells him to. And so tricking is like it is lying because you're not being truthful. And so he does all of that and he goes before his father. And Isaac was kind of confused because Isaac was like, you sound like Jacob. But when he touched him, he was hairy like Esau and he smelled like Esau. And so Isaac is like, well, I guess this is Esau. And so Isaac ends up passing the blessing down to Jacob, who he thought was Esau. And so Jacob now carries the blessing. And remember, this was the blessing, the birthright from God. This is the blessing that God had given to Abraham, and that was passed down to Isaac. And now Isaac has passed it down to Jacob. That's that same blessing. And so it's material and spiritual blessings. And so Esau comes back, finally after hunting and cooking. He said, okay, Father, here's everything. I'm ready for you to bless me. And so Isaac's like, wait, somebody just came in here and I blessed him already. That wasn't you, Esau? And Esau's like, no, that was not me. And Isaac realized that he blessed the wrong person and he gave the blessing to Jacob instead of Esau. And so Esau is now angry. He's upset. He wants to kill Jacob because Jacob stole the blessing. But let's go back a few years ago when Esau gave his blessing away for food. And now he's upset because now the time has come for him to get the blessing and he can't get it. And now he's mad. He should have been wise in his decisions years before. And so I told you it was just a bunch of chaos in the family. Rebekah and Isaac, because of their own favorite son, they both, were trying to deceive and disobey God. Jacob listened to his mother, and he's still just as responsible as his mom for lying to his father. That's sinning against the Lord. And Esau, he should have never gave his blessing away. He should have been serious about his blessing years before, and he maybe wouldn't have been in this situation right now. So yes, God did want to give the blessing to Jacob, but God was going to give it to Jacob on his terms, and God was going to do it on his time and his way. And so Jacob did not have a right to try and steal the blessing. So everyone is wrong in this case. And so next week we will discuss the aftermath of all of this. And remember, I said on yesterday that Jacob would have to go through a lot before he could see the evidence of the blessing. And so God would have to teach Jacob a lot of different things. He would go through a lot with the Lord, and God will actually change his name because remember, Jacob met trickster, and the Lord will change his name into something greater. And so that's our Bible lesson on today.